Nearly 20 years ago, Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, wrote an article about the future of the internet. He called it "Content is King," and he suggested that the growth in computer-mediated communication, that the key would be content. Communication professionals often misquote this phrase. They argue that we need to put more effort towards content. They say because content is king. But what if we look at this with more critical analysis and we think about, are there circumstances at play, bigger circumstances surrounding the content that could be important? So what if context was king? Hi, my name is Katherine Carson, and I'm going to be overviewing how specific context help to guide interpersonal communication by using the rules of meaning and action that are found under the comprehensive communication theory known as the coordinated management of meaning. Context can be seen as the key to interpretation. In fact, Bateson suggests that without context, words and actions have no meaning at all. At all is a pretty strong statement, so let's try to understand the meaning behind his thought. Let's consider an example, the game of chess. While I don't personally play chess and really don't understand the game of chess, I at least know that there are players, moves, pieces, and events. And ultimately, there's a victor, there's a goal. Chess itself is obviously a game that's under a bigger context, and that context may be competition or the spirit of play. It's the broader perspective of what is actually happening. Another example could be a conversation between an employee and a boss, maybe in an annual employee evaluation or a performance evaluation. If that is the context, there would likely exist an understanding or an expectation going into that evaluation for feedback, for positive feedback, for instructive feedback, for critical dialogue. If both the employee and the boss had that coordinated management of meaning, then there would exist an understanding of the potential communication that would be exhibited during this social interaction. If there was not a coordinated management of meaning, there would be miscommunication. And we all know miscommunication leads to big problems, conflict, all kinds of things. So meanings are assigned to messages and behaviors during these interpersonal communication, social interactions. So meanings help humans to understand and to make sense of what's happening. It's this dyadic coordination that Peirce, Cronin, and colleagues titled the Coordinated Management of Meaning Theory. And so this theory takes into account all the forces at play, enabling logically derived explanations. This enables individuals to reach personal goals during the coordination or the interaction. Returning to the example of chess that I mentioned previously, at a more detailed level of the game of chess, we know that there are specifically defined rules. These rules are known as constitutive. Constitutive, also to be more specific, are the rules of the game. They are the rules of meaning. Donald Davidson, a researcher known for his convention on meaning, suggests that without these rules, there would be no meaning at all. So constitutive rules can be thought of as rules of meaning. Under CMM, there also exist rules of action. These rules of action are known as regulative rules, and regulative rules help to shape how people behave or how they respond, and they're very logical, they're purposeful. An example of this could be never chew with your mouth open. So these rules are rules of action. They're a result of what is logical behavior, as I mentioned, and they're therefore known as logical force. So logical force can be in casual interactions. It could be practical force, it could be contextual, as we're looking at, and it could also be implicative. Context at play is a very integral role in the coordinated management of meaning. And to further explore CMM in more empirical studies so we can see how it's played out, I'd like to briefly overview two empirical research examples. First of all, the Cupertino project in Cupertino, California. During the mid-1990s, a nonprofit group of communication scholars formed the Public Dialogue Consortium, or the PDC, and they had the distinct goal of improving public communication using CMM. And they decided to meet with the residents of Cupertino, California during their town hall meetings and help them through the process of communication using CMM. The reason why they chose this area is because there already existed conflict over ethnic diversity. That was a hot topic, and so the PDC focused on moving and shaping conversations surrounding this, and they were using the architecture of the conversation by asking questions, by offering criticisms. They really helped to work meaning of the conversation towards resolution. The PDC found that critical dialogue proved the significance of how CMM functions because it located each act or the episodes within a context or a set of contexts. This includes stories, relationships, and co-constructed meanings. The second study that was researched and that I conducted research on was in the area of the inhabitants of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And there was a group of communication scholars who chose this area because culture played a significant role in the construction of their messages regarding the childhood feeding practices that they were using. And there was a growing problem of childhood obesity in that area. And so through the observations, it was proven that there was an overarching influence of archetypes or cultural contexts, cultural values that played a major role in the decisions of the dietary habits that they enacted. So this proved that individuals negotiated these nutritional meanings within the context of different message sources. So they saw familial message sources, families who passed down meaning. They saw historical. There was a lot of emphasis on rice consumption that came because of some of the cultural, historical things that were passed down from generation to generation. And, storytelling was a big part of what was observed during this. Moving on towards strengths and weaknesses in CMM, very briefly, one specific strength of CMM theory is that it takes into account so much of the context at play. So it helps us with the big picture of understanding, and we can look at that through a sociocultural lens, as we've talked about, or an ethnic lens, even relational contexts. As a weakness of CMM theory, it usually doesn't take into account the often unequal distribution of power or privilege among communicators. And so there may exist varying degrees of social power that's displayed, which could affect the coordination, especially of those co-created messages. And finally, from a biblical worldview, co-created meanings during social interaction is a significant part of sharing the gospel with others. And if we are going to be intentional in these gospel interactions, we need to understand the context at play in the individual or the unbeliever who we may be trying to share the gospel with. Furthermore, we could draw a parallel for arguing the importance of context or hermeneutical literary context, meaning if we're not drawing the right context from Scripture, the interpretation of Scripture, and sharing the gospel accordingly, we may be sharing the wrong thing. I'm going to end with a quote from Dean Fleming, who wrote, in terms of this biblical contextual worldview, he said, "Contextualization refers to the dynamic and comprehensive process by which the gospel is incarnate within a concrete historical and cultural situation. This happens in such a way that the gospel both comes to the authentic expression in the local context and at the same time prophetically transforms the context."